Greetings, friends. I'm Craig DeRoche, the CEO of Family Policy Alliance, and what a show we have for you today. Folks, even before I had my job, I knew I was going to get this job because of just how I walked into the building at the Focus International Building. Focus on the Family, of course, located in Colorado Springs. When I was interviewing to be the CEO of Family Policy Alliance, I walk in, it's after hours, and dark into the right was the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, the exact same way I walked in and past John Stonestreet's office when I walked in a prison fellowship in 2010, when he and I were both mentees of the late, great Chuck Colson. We both risen up within the organization. I was the president of Justice Fellowship. John, with the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, he led bringing that out to be an independent organization after Chuck returned home to glory. And he is one of the most inspiring theologians in America. And I listen to him every day. And a big part of why we had him come here today is to make sure that our growing audience is participating in learning about Breakpoint and the Colson Fellow program. John, it's such a privilege to have you with us. Thank you for joining today.
Craig, it's always great to work with you. We've been doing it for a long time here, and but it's always fun.
And it's always fun, and in a way, it seems like God might have put some, we think of it as an anointing, as a favor, but when you look back at it decades later of the work that I've seen you toil away out in the fields, you're where the workers are might have been few, but John Stonestreet is one of them. And you came out to our SoCon conference this summer, folks, and John's got a much bigger audience than ours. He speaks to millions of Americans every day across thousands of radio stations. But we have the Social Conservative Conference where the organization leaders come in for their nourishment and their worldview. And John, you blew everybody. I don't even have any hair, and you blew my hair back. Give us some of the message you had from this summer about the so what. Why should social conservatives and Christians care about participating in this thing that we have, America?
Yeah, well, look, the problem is we live in a cultural moment where things really seem to be in flux, right? I mean, the currents are changing quickly. The issues seem to be popping up everywhere. And I think a lot of us feel like what we're doing is playing kind of a version of kind of cultural whack-a-mole. You know, this issue pops up and we like, well, that's not right. And you just try to smack it down. Or this issue pops up. It's like, well, how do I make sense of that? And we smack it down. And what we need is the solid ground. And the only solid ground there is biblical truth. But a lot of people think of biblical truth as kind of like a moral of a story. In other words, truth about how to behave, how to be a moral person. Really what the Bible gives us is a framework of reality. It gives us definitions of how God created and intended the world to be, especially human relationships. And so we need the clarity of a Christian worldview so we can get through the fog of a culture that is changing fast. And there's no question that it's changing fast. Now, specifically why I love Family Policy Alliance, I love the organizations that are part of this network of folks engaged in communities all over the place, is that it takes seriously the role of the state, the role of politics, the role of public policy to either reflect what's true or to deny what's true. And Christians, if we have this gift of truth, we need to share it with others. And that's not just on a one-to-one basis. We also want to have communities, cities, institutions within our country built around what is true, because that's also going to be connected with what is good and what is good for us. That's how the church has always understood it, that when we have biblical truth, we are accessing the truth about reality and the truth about the human condition in particular. And without that grounding, we're just playing whack-a-mole.
And that's really, and you say issue after issue, and that's what I think we're up against right now is a lack of wisdom, John, that I see my friends, some of them I served with, 20 years ago when I was in politics, and they're confounded by problems that are facing our culture because they've kind of lost the lead on that truth. I don't know if you and I both worked directly for Chuck Colson, coming up on 15 years ago now, that was, and he lectured me one time when I was talking about conservatism, and he could be brusque, and he turned around and he said, you're not saying it the right. Conservatism isn't an ideology. It's the pursuit of truth. And that's what I do. And the truth comes from the Bible. If raising taxes, now I was the political leader at Justice Fellowship, so we were talking about policy. We talk about worldview. He said, if raising taxes, giving people free houses worked, I would support it. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you can find out why in the Bible, right? And that really helped me with my grounding. And that's really what we're doing is, and I think a lot of people out there are falling for this world from the evil one in the form of a serpent, started manipulating words all those years ago. John, isn't that kind of the same go-to tactic that we're up against right now? Like use of words like conservative or love itself or life, where your life comes from. Isn't there a lot of kind of Genesis 1 through 3 tactics being deployed against America right now, particularly our rising youth?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think Solomon was the one who said there's nothing new under the sun. But, the difference in our culture is we have access to everything all at once because of digital media and technology. And then we also have just means of moving culture in such a quick speed. And at the root of it, is language. Now, look, from a Christian worldview, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because at the root of reality is language. It's God's language. Now, the postmodern lie is that culture is nothing more than human language, which refers to other human language and never accesses any solid ground of reality itself. The biblical worldview is that the world is built from language, but it's not human language, it's God's language. And that's why you can really skew people's perspectives. And I mean individuals, as well as entire communities and entire civilizations, by changing the meaning of words. And we've all had that experience now, especially, where we're in a conversation with someone and really quickly we realize, man, we're using the same vocabulary, but we ain't using the same dictionary. What I mean and what you mean aren't the same thing. I tell the story a lot where years ago, when I first got to know Chuck, I was on a plane heading across the country, and this woman asked me what I did. And I said, well, I work for a Christian leadership organization. And she cocked her head back. She's like, I'm an atheist, prove me wrong. And so we started this 3-hour conversation, and she just began it. How do you believe in God? And, I went to seminary. I paid a lot of money to be able to answer that question, but I had been really taught on this idea of worldview and especially the meaning of words. And I said, well, what do you mean by God? And she went on to describe essentially Zeus, a big Greek god in the sky who has a beard and can't wait for you to do something wrong so he can punish you. And I was like, that's not the God I believe in. I'm not going to guard. But think about all the other words in which we are fighting over these definitions. And these definitions are really at the root of our culture. Marriage and family. It's clear from all the data that marriages bring goods to both individuals and to societies like almost no other institution. You want to solve poverty, you want to solve, dropout rates in school or high incarceration rates in a community, fix the family, put the dad in the home. Well, what we've done in our culture is say, well, look, the family's good. Let's call more relational arrangements a family, and then we'll get the same benefits. It's kind of like me saying, hey, the Rockefellers are rich. I'm going to legally change my name to Rockefeller so I can be rich too. It's like, well, that's not the way it works. But that's what happens when we start changing the meaning of the word marriage or the meaning of the word family. Certainly, what do we mean by life? What do we mean by rights? What do we mean by justice? Both parties right now claim to be the party of freedom. Well, what does freedom mean? And Os Guinness, our friend, puts it really well. He goes, if you misdefine freedom, that's the quickest way to squander freedom. And in other words, it really matters what we think. And I want to go back, and that pursuit of truth, and you said it well, is wisdom. Sometimes when people hear the word worldview, maybe they think academics or they think theology, and theology is at the root of it. Don't get me wrong. But really what we're looking for is what's true and what's good. The way the world actually is. And that's, of course, what the psalmist says. There's a way of wisdom, there's a way of folly. Proverbs says the same thing in multiple chapters. And you want to be on the way of wisdom. That doesn't mean having the answer to each and every question, but it does mean having the foundations of what's true about reality, what's true about the human person, and what are we to do as creatures that are made in the image of God. So
For you, I'm going to jump in right there because you're onto it. And this is why I wanted you on this show. Folks, thank you for being on the show. We're talking with John Stonestreet, the presidency of the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. And he's talking about the intersection of the difficulty we're all having. We're talking with people that have lost the lead. We're trying to talk to them about things like a gas station and they think it's a supermarket. So it's really hard for us to communicate with them about what we're doing. And you might be saying, this is new. John just said nothing is new under the sun. Folks, go back in the Bible. Read Acts 19:23. Look at what the political rallies were in Ephesus that day. They were yelling at each other for 2 hours, and they didn't know why they were there. They were shouting, chanting, "Great is the guard of Artemis," similar to what they're chanting at political rallies right now. And there were people there in Ephesus, in Acts, that the Lord had set to speak to those folks. And this is why John Stonestreet is on this show. Since I had the privilege of learning of Chuck Colson, meeting that gentleman, and finding out the legacy of these Christian theologians from Wilberforce and all these other people back, this wonderful tradition of passing on for seekers like me that gave our life and our will over to Jesus, and then would get whipsawed on the road by the evil one and his tactics in this world. We needed an equipping. And folks, you can't get a better equipping than you can get from the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. And that's part of what I wanted to do, John. We're going to have you on here all the time. You come to many of our events around the country. But on this show today, I wanted people to understand they've been hearing about that from Chuck Colson before he passed. Since he's passed, a lot of people have been thinking about, is this the year that I take the next step and become equipped to sharpen my sword, to serve the Lord maybe a little bit more this year? Tell us about what you're doing with that.
Yeah, Chuck started years ago a radio program called Breakpoint, and that's the first resource that the Colson Center continues to offer. Craig, I was in high school when that first came out, when Chuck first started doing that. My parents listened to Christian radio, and there was all these preachers that were talking about the Bible, which is great. Chuck was clearly doing something different. He was talking about what was happening in the culture from a biblical perspective. So he was talking about political things. He was also talking about movies. He was talking about sociological things. He was talking about history. And I was like, oh, wow, there's connections being made here that even though I'd grown up in the church, I didn't always make. Like, it's easy to think about your faith and how it applies to your Sunday, and maybe how it applies to your kind of moral, personal decisions. But how does it apply to my identity as a citizen or as a worker? What does that do in terms of human creativity and how I amuse or entertain myself? These were the connections that Chuck was making. It made a big impact on me. And then that's what Breakpoint is every single day. It's kind of this daily drip of connecting what's happening in the world around us with what is eternally true. I call it kind of a daily dose of sanity sometimes, or a look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. And that's what we need. And that's really what a worldview is what you look through to see the world. Well, you want to look through a prescription that actually brings things into focus and not further messes things up. And that's really what we're trying to do at Breakpoint.
So, now, but before you go on to the next one,
sure, yeah,
out there, because I want to get this right. I want everybody listening to get this right. That's the daily.
That's the daily, yeah.
It's a daily dose.
And it's on podcasts. You can sign up for the email. There's a bunch of ways to get it, yeah.
And the weekly, and it will help you. Like things, when this is showing you, you guys have all heard over the last couple of weeks, like that, wars are going on, things occur in the newspaper, at high schools, or in the political campaigns. Go to Breakpoint, the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. The links are added here. And you're going to want to add that to your podcast stream. You're going to want to add that to your daily messaging box. That's when I get it, when I go in through my devotions, when I am clearing out my head, when I'm in my prayer and meditation time. That's just my recommendation. Do it whenever you want, but that will help you. But see, this is the neat thing about Jesus in the Word, John. That makes me hungrier for more of the why.
Yeah,
like
that's right.
that you're doing. And that's what I got it wrong, but for the people that are saying this is a masterpiece and this helps me in my conversations all day, every day, including in my own family life. But there are people, and our audience is full of them, that say they're going to actually be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted you to be on here, because I did not know what I didn't know until I met Chuck Colson. And he blew me away. And there's so much to learn in so many rich layers once people get involved in your organization. Tell them about that, the next steps.
Yeah, well, I let me just hit that just quickly, because Jesus said the greatest commandment was to love Him with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And when I think of Chuck, I think of the fact that he used his hands, he used his heart, but he also used his head. And it's such a crazy thing that so many Christians feel confused about what's happening in the culture, because really this is the golden age of answers. I mean, the tough questions, and by and large, have been answered. It's just a matter of accessing those answers. And I love hearing from parents. I hear from grandparents who say, this lets me have things to talk to my grandkids about, because we all know there's such a big generational gap. So that's what's really encouraging. Now, you mentioned kind of the next step, and it's a big step. Years ago, Chuck was really challenged on his legacy. And of course, he wrote over 30 books. He started the largest prison ministry in the world. He did a remarkable started a remarkable justice reform movement, which has borne fruit even up until just recent years. One of the few bipartisan things that still exist out there. Just an amazing legacy that Chuck has. But Chuck really believed in passing on to everyday people, because God had called them as well to be agents of reconciliation and ministers of the gospel, just in different places. And so he started a program years ago called the Centurions Program. And we now have renamed that the Colson Fellows program after Chuck, because really that's what it was. You remember Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. Well, we followed Chuck as Chuck followed Christ. And Chuck really believed that he wanted to see his legacy be Christians in every walk of life who have been deeply grounded in a Christian worldview, understand the cultural issues that are around, and then also can provide leadership to their local Christian communities. And that's really what the Colson Fellows curriculum is. It's a 9-month deep dive into Christian worldview, what's happening in the culture, and how you can be a leader wherever God has placed you. Right now, we've just started our current class of 1,800 or so Colson Fellows that are studying in 70 different cities, city groups, and also 100 church groups. We also have cohorts that meet in 6 or 7 countries around the world. And some of these are educators, some of these are retired, some of these have sold a business and are on to kind of second careers. Some of these are young homeschool moms, some of these are legislators and medical professionals. We have a lot of lawyers that go through. We have pastors that go through. And what it is, it's a process of learning in the context of your Christian community, this idea of Christian worldview, being able to apply it to the toughest questions facing our culture. So think about the gender issues, the family issues, the justice issues. Think about Israel, Hamas, and the issues of, anti-Semitism. Think about the issues of CRT, critical race theory, or the various forms of critical theory. And, to your point, you said this earlier on, and I was thinking about this. What does a conservative mean? Well, a conservative has to have things to conserve, and we want to conserve the things that are eternal and work to preserve those things and not waste our time on things that are irrelevant. And that's really what this program does, is it helps us start and go, what is ultimately true? It also is a recognition in this program that God has called each and every believer to live like one in a particular cultural moment, in a particular setting. So the program ends with a teaching project, a 3-year plan where you apply what you've learned. I know you've gone through that program years ago when it was called Centurions, and there's been we have folks all over America, and it's been amazing to watch how God uses people. This isn't about the Colson Center saying cool things. This is about God using the Colson Fellows program to mobilize Christians for his church where they are. And so, look, it's not for the faint of heart. It's deep, it's wide, but man, the experience is life-changing. That's what we hear over and over and over again.
Well, that's why I wanted people to be aware of it. And it is deep and it is wide. This is not something that you guys can knock out in a weekend.
No.
Please hear me. Yeah, this is where the most important thing that you could be doing is beginning this with prayer. And I'll say start here. Sign up for everything at the Colson Center website except for the program, the fellowship program, because you should be undecided about that. And you should go into that if you join that cohort with full steam, because I assure you that the other 1,800 people that I've seen in those things are on fire for Jesus, and they've made the time that year to put into the program. But you can get started right now. And folks, it's a richness, and a depth to what John Stonestreet and the Colson Center for Christian Worldview understand. We want to be theologically correct. We believe that we are. In the corner we fight out of when we talk about policy, but we have to seek that wisdom every day too. And we don't have it without communicating and coming together in fellowship with the body of Christ, the capital C church, and that's the Colson Center for us. And so many of their graduates that partner with us and accelerate and move our movement forward. If you're already in our movement, you are. If you're watching this show, we want you to just similarly go deeper potentially in your prayer, in your walk with Jesus, and consider these things. It's been a huge privilege to have you on the show, John, here today. I'm not going to let you off the hook without telling people about your commentary on the pro-life movement of today that just came out. We only got a little bit of time to wrap up here, but I think it's a great teaser, folks, because I'll just give you my perspective. Heroin has been illegal in America for a long time. It appears that it's readily available. We're trying to eradicate abortion in America like slavery was eradicated. And John Stonestreet, as we would expect, God's put that on his heart. And just tell a little bit about that article, and they can go find that at the center right now about what you think we're into.
Well, look, here we are post Dobbs, post the end of Roe. And, if there was ever any idea that the Supreme Court had settled the issue of abortion for America by deciding Roe v. Wade, that proved to be incorrect. And if we thought that they were going to settle the issue in Dobbs by overturning Roe, that turned out to be incorrect. And it did go back to the states. It went back to the states, and now we live in a moment. And I think, really the last couple of months have been this kind of you are here moment in the pro-life movement. And a big part of it is, look, two things that we need to know. Number one is on a national level, the United States is now divided state by state on a deep moral issue in a way that we haven't seen since slavery and Jim Crow. So we're talking about a matter of ultimate importance, the definition of life, who counts as one of us, and whether they have a right to life. And we have a fundamental disagreement that is a chasm across states. We really do. Like there were slavery states and free states. We now have abortion states and life states. And we need to understand that. We need to double down then on these local efforts. We need to do everything we can to fight state by state. The second thing we've learned is that on a popular level, Americans tend to be moral relativist, and it's disappointing. I was hopeful and expecting that some of the data points that came out about the pro-life commitments of Americans were true. Turned out not to be nearly as true, that Americans actually want abortion limited except in 3 cases, and that's rape, incest, and my case. Whatever my case is, that one's an exception. And that's why I think when the votes have gone to the people, it's been the voters have been reticent to place any restrictions on themselves or the women in their lives. And that means we have to do more worldview work. That means we have to do more education and catechizing about what it means to be human, what gives life value. And on, we've got I think 12 states, this coming November with ballot initiatives having to do with abortion. We've got on the other end of life in West Virginia, they're actually trying to hold back doctor-assisted suicide in a pronounced way. And so these are opportunities for Christians to have a witness for life in a political way. But the political way is not the end game. And the politics isn't going to save us here. We have to do the hard cultural work that mostly is upstream from politics to help people understand what makes life valuable And what we need to do is imagine this future. It is unimaginable that someone would get on the national stage and say, we need to go back to slavery. It's gone from being something that's not just illegal, but completely unthinkable. Praise God. That's what we need to have happen on abortion. And so we need to learn about the education work that was done alongside of the political work of the Wilberforces and others around the world, and say, how can we then take that and apply that? And unfortunately, we also found out this term that the political party that was aligned with us on this is not completely aligned with us on this and is moving away. And so that has to change our political calculations and help us think through. I mean, we've got the most radical pro-abortion presidential campaign that really the world has ever seen versus a party that lines up pretty much where the safe, legal, and rare Democrats did in the 90s. And that's the reality. And we shouldn't delude ourselves. We need to do the hard work in between elections to build up the cultural realities. That begins, by the way, I think everybody needs to get on board and support pregnancy resource centers. And I know that all of the alliance partners that you have state by state see just the incredibly important work of these folks on the ground, meeting women at these moments of crisis and helping them choose life. We have to double down these efforts, and as much as we possibly can. I dedicate a lot of time to helping pregnancy resource centers in ways that I can, and continuing to do this educational work because it is that important.
One by one, everybody counts or no one's going to count. And that will happen faster than we all know or believe. I've run a government. I know what happens, folks. Consider what happens when governments have control over life. Really, really bad stuff has happened throughout all of humanity. America's considering whether or not we're going to allow government to have control over life or death itself for more years. We've allowed that for the unborn. For over 50 years now in America. We allowed that for a lot of other bad things in the past. So we're still trying to live up to our ideals. Having John Stonestreet on the show is a rare privilege, and you're a true friend of mine, brother. It's good to be with you. I was with my friend in North Carolina, Josh Drake. He says hello to you. He misses you dearly, and I will see you really soon. And folks, when you leave the show, please sign up for Breakpoint, and we'll get back together soon, John.
Hey, appreciate you so much. Love the work that you guys do, and we're with you, brother. Thanks so much for having me on.
God bless you.